There are houses that feel wrong before you understand why. Not haunted in the dramatic sense, no cold spots, no voices, no shadows moving against the light. Just wrong in the specific cellular way of a place where something has happened that the walls have absorbed and have not yet decided to release. Cole Merritt felt it the moment he turned the key in the lock of 14 Sutter Lane, Asheville, North Carolina, on the first Saturday of September. He felt it and dismissed it because he was 34 years old and recently divorced, and had driven 11 hours from Memphis with everything he owned in the back of a rented truck, and the only feeling he had the capacity for right now was relief that the driving was over. He should not have dismissed it. Cole Merritt had taken the rental sight unseen, which was the kind of decision a man makes when his life has recently been reorganized without his permission, and the reorganization has left him with less time, less money, and less energy for the ordinary logistics of finding a place to live. The job at Asheville Architectural Group had come through in July senior draftsman, a significant step up from the firm in Memphis, where he had spent 6 years drawing other people's visions into buildable reality. The divorce had been finalized in August. September was Asheville. The rental listing had described 14 Sutter Lane as a detached 2-bedroom cottage on a half-acre lot in the western residential district of Asheville, recently renovated, quiet neighborhood, utilities included. The photographs showed a white-painted exterior, a covered porch, hardwood floors inside, a kitchen with new appliances. The rent was $400 below market rate, which should have been the first question Cole asked. He did not ask it. He sent the deposit electronically to the account number provided by the property manager and received the address, the key code, and a brief email from someone named Earl Prout that said, "Welcome to Sutter Lane. We are good neighbors. You will be comfortable here." The property was at the end of a cul-de-sac, which meant the only houses visible from the porch were the 3 on the same street, 2 on the left side, 1 directly opposite. The house directly opposite was larger than the others, set back from the road behind a chain-link fence with a garden that had been maintained to the specific standard of people who wanted it to look maintained without drawing attention to how carefully it was maintained. A black pickup truck in the drive. Lights on in the back of the house but not the front. Cole unloaded the truck, ordered food from a place on Merritt Avenue, ate it on the porch, and went to bed at 9 p.m. He was asleep by 9:15. He was awake at 2:47 a.m. when the sound of a vehicle pulling slowly down the cul-de-sac reached him through the bedroom window he had left open against the September warmth. He lay still and listened. The vehicle, he could not tell the type from the sound, something larger than a sedan, stopped in front of the house across the road. Doors opened, closed, low voices, no words distinguishable. The specific sound of something being loaded or unloaded, a dull weight movement. Then the vehicle started again and drove back up the cul-de-sac and out of the street. Cole looked at the ceiling for a while. Told himself it was nothing, some reasonable explanation. Deliveries ran at all hours. People came home late. The world moved at night in 100 unremarkable ways. Told himself all of this and went back to sleep. The same sound came the following night at 3:12 a.m. Earl Prout came to the door of 14 Sutter Lane on Cole's third morning, carrying a jar of tomatoes from the garden, and wearing the expression of a man performing welcome with the specific practiced ease of someone who had been performing it for a long time. He was 62, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, with a handshake that was slightly too firm in the specific way of men who understood that physicality was a language and chose to speak it at a volume slightly above comfortable. "Cole," Earl said, as if they were already on the terms that implied the first name. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," Cole said. "Good, quiet neighborhood." Earl smiled. "We like it that way." He extended the jar. "Mabel's tomatoes. She puts them up every fall." "You'll want them." Cole took the jar. "Thank you, I appreciate it. You need anything at all, you come directly to us." Earl nodded toward the house across the road. "We are right there, day or night." Cole thanked him again, and Earl walked back across the road with the easy, unhurried stride of a man who owned the ground he walked on, which Cole reflected was literally true Earl Pruitt owned 4 of the 6 properties on Sutter Lane, including the one Cole was standing in. The Pruitt family, Cole learned from casual internet searching that evening, had been in residential property in Asheville for 23 years. Earl and Mabel Pruitt, proprietors of Pruitt Property Management, a small operation managing 12 residential properties across the Western District. Their son Darren, 35, listed as co-owner. The business had a website that was functional without being informative and a Google rating of 4.1 stars with 11 reviews, most of them brief and generic. One review, posted 8 months ago and since deleted, Cole found it in a cached page, said only, "Do not rent from these people. I am serious. Do not." The review had been posted by a username that no longer existed. Cole screenshotted and put his phone on the charger and told himself he was building a narrative out of 2 sounds in the night and a deleted Google review. He was an architect. He understood the way buildings worked, the way sound traveled through structures and streets, the way ordinary things produced inexplicable-seeming noise at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world was quiet. There was an explanation. There was always an explanation. The vehicle came again at 2:53 a.m. Mabel Pruitt was 58 years old and grew tomatoes, attended Mount Calvary Baptist every Sunday, and had the specific quality of warmth that settled over people like a hand on the shoulder, immediate, enveloping, slightly too insistent. She appeared at Cole's door on the following Saturday with a casserole dish and an invitation to Sunday dinner, and Cole accepted both because declining felt rude, and because he had been in Asheville for 10 days and had spoken to approximately no one outside the architectural firm. The Pruitt house was immaculate in the way of houses, where immaculateness was not a preference but a requirement. Everything in its place, nothing out of order. The specific organized control of an interior where disorder was not permitted. Darren Pruitt sat across the dinner table from Cole, 35, quiet. With his father's build and his mother's surface warmth and something underneath both that Cole could not immediately name. His eyes moved across Cole in a way that was not hostile and was not friendly and was something more like assessment, the measuring look of a man taking the dimensions of something he needed to know the size of. "What brought you to Asheville?" Earl asked, passing the bread. "Work," Cole said. "Architecture firm on Lexington. Before that, Memphis. Family there, not anymore." Earl nodded as if this confirmed something. "Fresh start," he said. "Good place for it. People come to Asheville for fresh starts. We've had a lot of tenants over the years starting over." He smiled. "We look after our tenants," Mabel said. "You have everything you need at the cottage, everything comfortable. Everything's great," Cole said. "It's very quiet." Something passed between Earl and Mabel across the table. Not a look exactly. More like the specific micro-adjustment of 2 people who have been communicating in the register below words for long enough that the communication is essentially involuntary. Cole saw it the way he saw everything, precisely, without immediately knowing what to do with what he had seen. Darren said nothing for the entire meal. He ate with the focused economy of someone whose attention was elsewhere and whose presence at the table was a formality rather than a choice. When Cole stood to leave, Darren finally spoke at the door while Earl and Mabel were in the kitchen. He said, looking at Cole with a measuring look, "You sleep okay out there?" "Fine," Cole said. "Good sleeper, usually." Darren nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "That's good." And went back inside. Cole bought a baby monitor on a Tuesday, not for the sound, for the camera. The kind with night vision, small enough to position in the gap between the porch railing posts, angled across the road at the Pruitt driveway. He told himself he was being paranoid. He set it up anyway because paranoia and preparation were not always different things. The footage from the first night showed nothing. The second night showed the black pickup truck leaving at 11 p.m. and returning at 1 a.m. The third night showed what Cole had been hearing but had not yet seen. At 2:40 a.m. the truck returned, and a second vehicle, a white panel van with no visible plates, pulled into the cul-de-sac behind it. 3 figures got out of the van. Earl, Darren, and a third man Cole did not recognize, heavy-set baseball cap, moving with the specific purposeful efficiency of someone doing a job they had done many times. They opened the van's rear doors. They carried 3 large black duffel bags from the van to the truck, transferred them, and drove the van back out of the cul-de-sac while Earl and Darren took the truck down the road heading north. 3 large black duffel bags. The kind of weight they carried was not the weight of objects. Cole knew this the way you know certain things, not from evidence but from the specific deep brain alarm that activates when the body understands something the mind is still processing. He watched the footage 4 times. Then he called the Asheville Police Department's non-emergency line and reported what he had seen. The officer who took the call was professional and patient and told him they would look into it. Cole gave the address, the description of the vehicles, the times. He was thanked and told someone would follow up. Nobody followed up. Detective Yara Sims of the Asheville PD was 41 years old and had been working missing persons cases in Buncombe County for 9 years, which meant she had developed the specific patience of someone who understands that the cases that break open do so because of the person who called at the right time with the right detail, and that dismissing those calls is the mistake that haunts careers. She had not been the officer who took Cole's initial call. She found it in the log 3 days later because 3 days later, a 6-year-old girl named Paisley Durden from the West Asheville neighborhood had been reported missing by her parents. And missing children in West Asheville made Yara look at everything in the log from the previous week with the full attention she brought to everything. She drove to Sutter Lane on a Thursday afternoon and knocked on the door of number 14. Cole opened it in his work clothes, lunch hour, and looked at her badge with the expression of someone who had been waiting for this visit and had begun to think it was not coming. She sat at his kitchen table and watched the baby monitor footage on his laptop. She watched it without speaking, leaning slightly forward, her coffee going cold beside her. Then she asked Cole 4 questions, precise, specific, the questions of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Then she told him not to change anything. Not the monitor, not his behavior toward the Pruitts, not his routine. She gave him her direct number and told him to text, not call. And she told him to be careful about what he noticed and what he let them know he noticed. "Are these people dangerous?" Cole asked. Yara looked at him. "I need you to behave as though the answer to that is yes," she said, "until I tell you otherwise." Pruitt family had been operating for 11 years. This was what Yara's investigation, cross-referencing the Sutter Lane address against missing persons reports, vehicle registrations, and a database of known trafficking networks that the FBI's Charlotte field office maintained, began to reveal in the 2 weeks following her visit to Cole. 11 years of the specific careful infrastructure of people who understood that longevity required invisibility. The property management business was real 12 rental properties, legitimate tenants, legitimate income. It was also the mechanism by which Earl Pruitt identified targets. Tenants who were alone, who had no local family, who had children who were starting over. People who had come to Asheville for fresh starts and who would not be immediately missed if something changed. The network was not just the Pruitts. The third man from the van footage, identified by Yara from Cole's footage as Hector Briggs, 44, with 2 prior arrests in South Carolina for assault, was the connection point to a trafficking operation that moved children from western North Carolina to buyers in 3 states. Some of the children were sold. The ones who could not be sold, who had seen faces, who had made noise, who had become problems, were not sold. The duffel bags were not always moving children to the van. Sometimes, the duffel bags were moving the children who had become problems to the truck. To somewhere north of Asheville, where Darren Pruitt owned a parcel of undeveloped land in his mother's maiden name that had never been connected to the family in any public document, and that Yara identified through a deed search that took her 14 hours and 3 county databases. Paisley Durden had been missing for 11 days. Yara called the FBI field office in Charlotte on a Friday morning. She called the Buncombe County Sheriff on the same Friday afternoon. She called Cole on Friday evening and said, "Stay in the house tonight. Do not engage with them. Do not look at the driveway. Just stay inside." Cole stayed inside. At 2:17 am the truck and the van came. He did not look out the window. He sat in the dark kitchen with his phone in his hand and watched the baby monitor footage on his laptop and texted Yara a description of everything he saw in real time. At 2:41 a.m. 6, law enforcement vehicles entered the cul-de-sac simultaneously from both ends. The arrest of Earl, Mabel, and Darren Pruitt happened in the Pruitt driveway at 2:43 a.m., with the specific controlled efficiency of a joint operation that had been planned across 2 days and executed in under 4 minutes. Hector Briggs was arrested at the wheel of the panel van. A fourth individual, a woman named Connie Aldridge, 51, who had been in the back of the van and whose role in the operation Yara's subsequent investigation would define as transport coordination, was taken into custody without resistance. Cole watched all of it from his front window with the lights off, standing against the wall so he was not visible from outside. He watched Earl Pruitt being handcuffed in his driveway, the man who had brought tomatoes from Mabel's garden and told Cole he was a good neighbor and said we look after our tenants. The man whose handshake was slightly too firm. The man whose eyes had moved across Cole at that first-door conversation with the specific measuring quality of someone calculating whether a thing was a problem or a resource. Cole had been a resource. A single man, no local family, starting over. The kind of tenant the Pruitts had learned to identify over 11 years of property management. He had been assessed and found useful. A legitimate tenant whose presence at 14 Sutter Lane provided cover for the activity across the road. The $400 below market rate was not a discount. It was a calculation. Mabel Pruitt was led out of the house in her bathrobe, and Cole noticed that her face was the same as it had been at Sunday dinner. The specific organized warmth, the performed comfort, the hand-on-the-shoulder quality that had seemed immediate and genuine and was neither. She looked once across the road at number 14, found Cole's window, found his face in the dark. She held the look for 3 seconds. Then she was guided into the vehicle and the door closed. Darren did not look at anything. He walked to the vehicle with his eyes down and his hands cuffed, and his face the face of a man who had always known this morning was possible, and had decided somewhere along the way that knowing it was possible was sufficient preparation for when it arrived. It was not sufficient preparation. Cole sat down on the floor of his dark living room after the vehicles left, his back against the wall, and stayed there for a while. Paisley Durden was found alive. She was found on the morning following the arrests, on the parcel of undeveloped land in Darren Pruitt's mother's maiden name, in a structure that had been built to look from the road like a storage shed and was not a storage shed. She had been there for 12 days. She was dehydrated and frightened and had a cut on her forearm that required 6 stitches, and she recognized the emergency responder who found her from a school visit program and said his name when she saw his face and did not stop saying it for several minutes. She was not the only child found on the property. 2 others were recovered. A 9-year-old boy named Aaron Whitfield, who had been reported missing from Black Mountain 4 weeks earlier, and a 7-year-old girl whose identity took the investigators 48 hours to confirm because she had been taken from a family in Tennessee and her disappearance had been filed in a different state system. Her name was Gemma Tate. She had been missing for 6 weeks. The children who had not been found, and there were children who had not been found, the investigation would determine over the subsequent months, their number growing as the records of the Pruitt operation were reconstructed from the evidence recovered on the property, and from the cooperation of Hector Briggs, who began cooperating with prosecutors within 72 hours of his arrest, with the specific thoroughness of a man trying to reduce the number of years the cooperation would cost him. Those children were the weight in the duffel bags that Cole had not seen but had understood. The land north of Asheville was large. The investigation would take time. Yara Sims called Cole on the morning of the recovery. "The girl is safe," she said, and Cole held the phone and did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "How many?" And Yara said, "We are still counting." And Cole said, "How long?" And Yara said, 11 years. And Cole said, "They were here the whole time." And Yara said, "Yes." And neither of them said anything else for a while. The trial of Earl and Mabel Pruitt opened in Buncombe County Superior Court 14 months after the arrests, by which time the investigation had expanded to include 17 confirmed victims, 9 law enforcement agencies across 4 states, and a network of buyers whose prosecution was being managed simultaneously by the FBI's Charlotte and Atlanta field offices. The case against Darren Pruitt was tried separately in federal court on trafficking charges. Connie Aldridge pled guilty in exchange for testimony and received 22 years. Cole testified on the third day of the Earl and Mabel Pruitt trial. He sat in the witness box in the same courtroom where, 14 months earlier, he had given his initial statement to the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, and he answered the prosecutor's questions in the specific direct way of someone who has had 14 months to think about what he saw and what it meant, and has arrived at a clarity about it that does not require performance to convey. He described the sounds, the vehicles, the baby monitor, the footage, the Sunday dinner and the jar of tomatoes, and the handshake that was slightly too firm, the deleted Google review that no longer existed, the specific quality of wrongness he had felt when he turned the key in the lock on the first Saturday of September, the feeling he had dismissed because he was tired and had nowhere else to go. The defense attorney asked Cole on cross-examination whether he had any direct evidence that the Pruitts were engaged in criminal activity prior to the night of the arrests, any evidence beyond sounds and footage of vehicles in a driveway at night. Cole said, "No direct evidence." The defense attorney nodded as if this confirmed something. Then Cole said, "But I had a feeling on the first night I slept in that house. The kind that comes before evidence. The kind that tells you something is wrong before you can prove it. I should have listened to it sooner." The defense attorney moved on. Earl Pruitt received 4 consecutive life sentences. Mabel Pruitt received 3. Darren Pruitt received 47 years in federal prison. Hector Briggs received 31 years. The buyers identified through the investigation received sentences ranging from 8 to 26 years, depending on the specific nature of their involvement. The land north of Asheville was searched for 8 months. 4 additional sets of remains were recovered. The identification process took longer. The families were notified one by one in the specific terrible way that families are notified of these things, by the people whose job it is to carry that weight so that no one has to carry it alone. Cole Merritt moved out of 14 Sutter Lane on the last Friday of October, 13 months after he moved in. Not because Asheville had become wrong. Asheville was fine. The architectural firm was good. The work was the work he had come for. But the house at the end of the cul-de-sac was the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. He had stopped sleeping well in September of the previous year, and had not fully recovered the ability to sleep well while his bedroom window faced a driveway where he knew what he now knew. Some addresses become unreliable. Some streets become permanently themselves in a way that cannot be renovated away. He found a place on the north side, a third-floor apartment with no cul-de-sac, and no driveway visible from the bedroom and neighbors above and below and on both sides. The specific density of other people's ordinary lives that he had not understood he needed until he had lived for 13 months without it. Yara Sims called him on the day he handed back the keys to the property management company that had acquired the Pruitt portfolio during the legal proceedings. She said, "You doing okay?" Cole said. "Getting there," she said. "You know what you did." It was not a question. Cole said, "I know what I heard and what I filmed and who I called." Yara said, "That is what you did. That is the whole thing. You heard something and you didn't let yourself be talked out of it." Cole was quiet for a moment. "I almost was," he said. "Talked out of it." Yara said, "Almost doesn't count." Paisley Durden's parents sent Cole a card. He did not know how they had found his address, probably Yara, probably with his permission. He couldn't quite remember authorizing it, but was glad it had happened. The card had a drawing on the front that Paisley had done herself, a house with a big sun above it and a stick figure on the porch, arms spread wide. Inside, her mother had written, "We do not have words. Thank you for not going back to sleep." Cole put the card on the kitchen counter of the new apartment and looked at it every morning while he made his coffee. There are houses that feel wrong before you understand why. This is not a metaphor and it is not superstition. It is the specific intelligent alarm of a body that processes information faster than the mind gives it credit for, that registers the shape of wrongness before the wrongness has a name, that knows, in the cellular way of something designed to survive, that some doors open onto things that should not be left unopened. Cole Merritt had almost gone back to sleep. He had not. 3 children were alive because he had not. There were others who were not alive, whose families were living inside the specific devastation of that. Cole thought about them too, every day, in the particular quiet of a man who understands that the thing he did was necessary and insufficient at the same time, that doing the right thing when you finally do it does not undo the time before you did it, and that living with that is simply what you do. You hear the sound. You do not go back to sleep. You call the number. You stay in the house and you watch the monitor and you text the detective in real time and you do not look away. You do not look away. That is the whole thing. That is all of it. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to drop your comment telling us where you're watching from. Don't forget to watch and subscribe. See you in the next one.